Hello and welcome back to the Transfer Flow podcast. It's me, Patrick Van Straten, hosting this week, and I'm joined by Ravi Ramaneni. How are you, Ravi?
Hi, Patrick. I'm good. How are you?
I'm all good. I'm all good. We're coming today. We kind of the anticipation has been building for this shoot because we were going to shoot yesterday, and then your internet died, and you were
Yeah,
forced to resort to medieval methods of self-entertainment.
exactly. I got a message 2 hours after the outage started saying it was a planned outage. So
Oh, cool.
yeah, so it was like, and I didn't get the power back until midday. So I ended up just throwing my phone away and just reading a book, kind of
Wow.
stuff like old times.
Yeah, you went for a run and read a book. It is
Yes, I went for a
amazing.
run. I went for a run in 31-degree temperature
Oh my
and
god.
then centigrades, and I then read a book. It was actually a good ended up being a good morning without having to look at the screen for too long.
Sure, sure. Well, today we are back, and I've been quite excited to talk about this news. You know, we've kind of been pumped to talk about it because it feels like the striker market went insane this week. It's been threatening to boil over all summer, but then this week, three or four dominoes seem to go. And the biggest of those dominoes, where I think we should start, if you're okay with it, is Julian Alvarez, who looks like he's on his way to Atletico Madrid for about 95 million euros, including add-ons, an awful lot of money. Um, it's a player that Man City wouldn't have wanted to lose going into this summer, right?
Yes, yes, he is. He's very very good, borderline elite,
Mm.
doing playing in different positions. I think that he's 24, and if you look at his resume of the things he's won, he's pretty much won everything for the national team and the club at club level. And
Mm.
he's played a part in all of this. It's not that he's a player number 22 on these squads, but he's played a part in all of them. He's a very good, complete attacker forward.
Mhm.
There's a few things he can't do, but I think for the most part, like I think he's very very good. He is um, he is like if you look at him, the quality of his play, both in creating chances, off the ball running, and also being at the end of chances, it's undeniable. This player, I think 95 million. I think it's a good price for Atletico for to
Mhm.
pay like for I was a little surprised seeing this deal being made by Atletico Madrid. They're
Mhm.
not the team I would have thought that would pay close to a nine-figure sum for a player from the Premier League, and probably they will set the record for the highest transfer this season from La Liga. But if you look at his qualities, I think he fits Simeone's style of play like a glove.
Yeah.
He's really like his defensive work rate, off the ball, pressing from front, and also tracking back when the ball turns over. I think all those, in addition to all his skills as an attacker or forward, I think those will make him like a he's a perfect. There you can rarely say anybody's perfect because I think that means that there is no flaws. But I think he's
Mhm.
as close as somebody that can get to a perfect player for a Simeone, perfect attacker for a Simeone system.
Yeah, I mean, with Griezmann, as Griezmann aged, it felt like Atleti were looking for a Griezmann replacement for about 7 or 8 years, and in the end, the best replacement they found for Griezmann was Griezmann coming back from
Yeah.
Barcelona.
Yes.
It's such a specific role because in the early days of Griezmann, he was required to basically build counterattacks by himself, to dribble out of pressure, get the ball upfield, wait to be joined by runners, and so having a guy here who is pretty fast, a good dribbler, a good passer, creative, gets more than his fair share of shots, but has kind of the trickery and stuff you'd expect from a wide player. This seems to be as good a Griezmann replacement as you could get, with Griezmann looking like he's off to LAFC.
Yeah.
As you say, an elite presser. And I'd say as well that they slightly underpaid for Conor Gallagher.
Mhm.
So between the two of them, these two transfers, I don't think are terrible to buy out of two very rich sides in the Premier League at these levels. What do we know about players transitioning out of Pep teams? Because that's the one question I kind of had here. That players on Pep teams, attackers on Pep teams, tend to put up good attacking numbers. It's understandable. They have all the ball. They create huge chances. Is there anything here that would make you think we would expect his attacking numbers to drop?
I think I think it's a valid question about Pep teams and players coming out of Pep teams. But I think with Alvarez, I think he's proven with the Argentine national team as well that he's really productive and very effective attacker. And even with Pep team, he was not even at City. He's not an out and out starter at any point in time.
Sure.
I think he played. Obviously, if Haaland is available, they will play him as a 9, and I think that makes sense. And Alvarez obviously will. I think his best role is not as a target forward, but playing off of a target 9. I think he can play any of the roles behind the target 9. I think that would be his best role because you can take maximum advantage of his skills, and he can shoot and cross with both feet. And that's very rare at this level. When I watch him on video, he's pretty good. It's not like it's a kind of a weak cross with one foot or the other, but it's pretty good crossing from both sides.
Yeah.
And I think so. Going back to your point, I do think he has shown enough of ability and production. In Pep's system, outside of Pep's system, Argentina play a very different style. I think he's shown enough that and to be effective that I don't have that concern with him.
Okay, and they've signed that target forward as well, haven't they? They brought in Alexander Sorloth, which seems like an excellent signing. It's kind of weird that Sorloth he's transitioned into being the player that I think a lot of teams thought he was years ago. When he went to Palace, I remember there was that feeling of, well, this guy's huge, so he must be your traditional big focal point centre forward. And at that point, he was much more comfortable playing wide and running up against fullbacks where he was such an enormous physical mismatch. And then last season, absolutely huge campaign as a much more conventional centre forward, right?
Yeah, last season he was playing off. He had Gerard Moreno, who's also a 9 that can play on the wing, on the right side, he's a left-footed player. And I think with Alvarez, that's how this is going to work. Just that Alvarez is probably like 3 times better than Gerard Moreno in terms of. I think he can do more things. I think Gerard probably can do 1 or 2 things at a very high level. I think Alvarez is a much more well-rounded player, and I think that combination. When I saw that they signed Sorloth, and now when I heard the rumor about Julian Alvarez, and then now you add also Conor Gallagher, that move is already done. I think Atleti is going to be a very strong contender in La Liga this year.
I completely agree. I mean, they're trying to get Javi Guerra as well, aren't they? Though, I don't know, maybe there's been a breakdown of talks there. But it does feel as well like this is a positive for Simeone's attitude to transfers as well, because something I've found frustrating with him over the last 10 years has been how risk averse he is in the transfer market. It feels, obviously they did the Joao Felix thing, which was a big swing. But other than that, they quite often went back for players that they knew. So you had Felipe Luis came back to the club after a period away. Diego Costa, Fernando Torres, Yannick Ferreira Carrasco, Antoine Griezmann, like a lot of guys that Simeone said, I need people I trust. Yeah. And I'd rather have somebody a bit past it, but who I trust, than a new thing. Whereas now it feels like there's some youth in there. They've obviously got Lino as well. There are some younger players in there.
Yeah, and so they're going to, basically, if you look at who Alvarez is going to take minutes from, it's going to be Griezmann. As Griezmann's move solidifies. I think they need to move him just to kind of open up the salary spot for all the new incomings, because he's probably on the biggest wage at Atletico. And there is Angel Correa. Correa is 29, 5 years older than Alvarez. Griezmann is going to turn 33 soon. He's 8 years older than Alvarez. So he's going to replace some of their minutes, or most of their minutes, with somebody in his prime. I think that's very good. And one of the things with and Alvarez is Argentinian, and Argentinians look at Diego Simeone like a god. I think that they have that reverence to him, and I think that a lot of them would just, and and I think he's a great motivator, and he's kind of convinces players to come and play. Why else would Joao Felix go to Atletico? Because that was a profile that there was no fit. Like,
Yeah.
you look at how Joao Felix plays, there was no way he was going to convert into a Simeone player. But I think if you look at this window, all the three players you mentioned, Conor Gallagher, um, Julian Alvarez, and Javi Guerra, I think they're more of a fit to his style. I think that those guys would be able to win that trust pretty quickly with him, and I think that's a huge difference between some of the old signings that did work out, and then they kind of resorted to bringing back the players that played there in the past, even if they were older. But I think
Hmm.
this time they are. I think the initial. I think that they're getting better profiles in the first time. So I think this has I think the writing of a really good campaign from Atletico, both in Champions League and in the league.
Yeah, I agree. And especially because I think there are kind of question marks about Barcelona's squad building. Actually, we're going to come on to that in our other podcast this
Yes.
week. So we'll be talking about Barcelona's big signing right now as well. So make sure that you check that out too. Should we move on to another forward
Sure.
changing club? So it looks like news breaking today, which is Friday, um, that Dominic Solanke's move to Spurs is going to happen. Um, he turns 27 in September, but is coming off a good season um, and extremely durable last season. He paid 41.390s in a 38 game Premier League campaign. So this is a guy who really did give Bournemouth their money's worth and now is apparently going to fetch a fee of about £60 million. So a really good price for them. Quite high for Spurs to pay, but probably the going rate for centre forwards now. Ravi, what's your initial reaction to this move?
Well, my initial reaction was when without looking at anything, just kind of going off my memory and what I've seen of him in the past, was like, this may be a bit of an overpay. Not
Mm-hmm.
sure if he would fit well. But then I looked at his data. I think he does like you were seen with Bournemouth and in the in Iraiola's system, like he is an aggressive presser from the front. Like he's a willing presser that goes again and again and again. I think that's something. And he's dominant in the air and really a big menace on set pieces. You need two players to mark him. So he's going to attract a lot of that. And I think that, and he's a target man. Like he's probably, after talking about Julian Alvarez, who's anything but a target man. We're talking someone that's just probably as pure a target nine that we're going to talk about
Mm-hmm.
this window. And he is like, as I said, he's dominant in the air. He's good at the hold up play. Like he can hold up the ball and then get some runners into play. One of the issues I've seen when I was looking at his data first was, well, he doesn't really participate much with other players in terms of like creation, shot creation. He's not somebody that can create his own shot. Now, those things generally go hand in hand. Like you have a tall, dominant in the air center forward. Generally, they're not that good at dribbling and taking a shot themselves that way. But then when I watched him, what I found was he's actually not. I think for a center forward, he's pretty good technically. I do think that in another team, like let's say Spurs, I think Spurs is who he's linked with, where there may be a more emphasis on that type of play with more technical players around him.
Mm-hmm.
I think he can do that. I think he can definitely do more than what he has shown so far. But that may be the one question mark I would have with him.
Yeah, I mean, this is slightly my concern. So I think with the balance in Spurs front line, there are quite a few players there who are not particularly involved in play. So Richarlison is at 16 passes per 90 minutes. Brennan Johnson 22. Son is at 27. Then you get Kulusevski 31. Werner 31. Um, and really the only kind of attacker here who's on the ball a lot is the guy you'd expect. It's James Maddison, who's at 50 passes a game. I worry that adding in this guy whose number of passes has gradually gone down as he's become a more effective centre forward, it feels a little bit like you need another on-ball guy there because you've got a lot of runners, but only really one attacking passer. So you can ask more of your fullbacks, who are quite attacking fullbacks. You can ask more of one of your central midfielders. But to me, when we were talking about someone like Eberechieze for Spurs earlier in the window, I think this front line makes more sense to me if I imagine another player of that type in there. I think they've also been linked to Ryan Cherki, that kind of guy, because otherwise it feels like it's kind of the opposite of England's problem at the Euros, where they had a ton of people who all wanted the ball to feet and nobody who was running off the ball. Instead, with Spurs, you might have everyone just like running into the penalty area. Because Solanke, like, really good at getting touches in the area, good at getting high value shots. But how are they going to build and sustain attacks in the final third, I guess, is a little bit more of an open question for me.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair concern. I do, as I said, like I did, it did when I watched him, it did alleviate a little bit of that fear for me. I
Sure.
think he can do it if he has to. Like, I mean, obviously he won't do it to the level of Harry Kane, and that may not be a bad thing. I think what he's gonna do is, I think, if you look at it in terms of on the field, he's gonna push the back line, because
Mm-hmm.
he's going to push the two center, because they need to mark him with two center backs all the time. Like, there is no, and so he's going to push that line back. So that should
Yeah.
give more volume, more space to the rest of the players to play. So I think even Madison, I mean, as you mentioned, Madison, but maybe even the others could get a little bit more on the ball if he can do that. I think, and then once they get into the running part and crossing the ball, I think he's going to be an absolute menace inside the box.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, and what you were saying about pressing as well, I think is just to me, that's a really important point, because Spurs attack last season, everybody had good numbers. Even Brennan Johnson had good numbers. In fact, Kulusevski was the only guy who didn't, and he's maybe one of the most talented players in that attack.
Yeah.
But what was interesting was that the entire back line they were all making more defensive actions than average for their position, especially Udogi and Romero, of course. And that's okay. Like, those guys are aggressive defenders. That's fine. But the fact that they were giving up a lot of goals while all their defenders were being very highly praised and were winning the ball a lot, I thought, oh boy, we need to find a way to stop some of these attacks before they're getting at the back line. And the way to do that seems to be to press more effectively, right?
Yeah, press more effectively, win the ball higher up. So Solanke is going to help with that, because with his press, even if he doesn't win the ball, I think the second, third play, he's gonna force the keeper into maybe a rushed pass, or a defender into passing into traffic, and they'll have more chances to win that second ball, or the second pass they can intercept. I think he's gonna have other players they'll get more chances to win the ball at higher up the field. So I think he's going to help that way, and that should alleviate some of the concerns. But I do agree with you on the concern part. Like, I did feel that at the beginning, but watching him, I think that they will look very different with him for sure than in the past, and I think that's a positive I see.
And certainly in his youth, he was thought of as being a very good passer. At Chelsea, and then on loan at Vitesse, and I think in the early days at Liverpool as well, there was an idea that he was quite a creative, good ball retention forward. Loads of turnovers now, but that's kind of his job, right? Get the ball, end attacks, as you were talking about previously. Should we move on to another attacker? So Niclas Fullkrug is at West Ham, off to West Ham, I don't know. And for me, this one was, that tweet that's like, when you think you're young and your life's still ahead of you, and then there's like a 30-year-old player and they're like, he's a miracle, the oldest player in the league. So I was researching Niclas Fullkrug, and I was just like, God, this guy's so old. He's going to be 32 in February. And my wife was like, you turned 35 2 days ago. Like, what? Shut up. But I didn't, cost my wife £30 million, which is apparently what Fullkrug has cost West Ham. As I say, 32 in February, coming off a good season. In fact, coming off two good seasons, like a good season with Bremen, 21 goal involvements in the Bundesliga, 20 last season. However, I really don't like this one, Ravi.
Yeah, no, even before going into his technical details, it's a
Mm.
4-year contract, so he's going to
Yeah.
turn 36 in his last season. I can't see that season being in West Ham in the Premier League. Like
Mm.
that's how I see it. I mean, you can call me cynical, but I look at this contract and you're trying to get maybe the best for the next 2 years. I think
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. It doesn't seem like a very well thought out contract, at least based on the details that are available to us. And then you look at the next thing. You look at, well, who else is there for in terms of forwards at West Ham? You have Mikel Antonio, who is 34, and Danny Ings, who is 32. Maybe there is another move they are going to do for a younger player.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't really inspire a lot of confidence to go through the rigors of a Premier League season with those three as your one of them. And then now coming to in going to more technical details, tactically, I don't think he's a nine that's like a target nine. His best action seems to be when he receives the ball wide, especially on the left side,
Mm-hmm.
and then runs inside the box or come to the top of the box. And that seems to be his best kind of action. Sometimes he plays on the right as well. I think for Germany, he played a little bit on the right in the Euro. But he's not someone that is going to hold up the ball. He's definitely going to be, if he plays as a nine, he's going to be the one that's going to be like sort of breaking the just making those runs in behind to get the ball to receive the
Mm-hmm.
ball. So he's a different type of nine that way. So and he's one thing he's really good at is he's an amazing ball striker.
Yeah.
Like the way he hits the ball is amazing. Like it's just so clean hits, and that that definitely, if I was a scout, that could definitely derail my assessment of him when I
Mm.
watch his clips or even his matches. The way he strikes the ball, that could definitely cloud my judgment a bit because he's very
Sure.
good with that.
Yeah.
Um, and so like he's a good passer, but then his best thing, as I said, he seems like you want to have you need another like a number nine, and Fullkrug playing off of him probably is the best, where he comes from the left side, try to take a shot with his right foot. This probably is something to do with his age, or maybe something to do with the tactical setups at his last teams, is that his defensive activity has been coming down in the last couple of years,
Mm-hmm.
uh, which which you know which is a bit concerning to and then but then I think that's again the bigger concern we have with this signing, being that he's definitely past his peak to like peak. So if you look at all the aging curve research and into research on that side, a forward like him that is definitely dependent to a degree on his speed and ability to make the off ball runs. I think 31 turning 32 is past the peak, and now you're going you signed him through further 4 years, which I think is probably not doesn't look like a wise contract on paper right now.
Yeah. Especially because I assume that, yeah, 31-year-old leaving Borussia Dortmund for West Ham. I assume West Ham have had to give him a decent sized contract because
Mm-hmm.
it's probably his last big contract. And that means that it's going to be hard to send him back to the Bundesliga when he's 33 because no one's going to cover, I don't
Yeah,
know, 75, 80,000 pounds a week, whatever it's going to be that he's getting paid. I mean, my worries about him as well, it's just his expected goal numbers are okay.
yeah,
But he,
they're not exceptional. They're okay.
yeah, and his shots are pretty low. Like you're looking at 2 shots per game out of this guy, but very high expected goals per shot. And that always scares me coming out of the Bundesliga. It really does. Because those shots, so the shot quality only needs to tick down a little bit for him to be a kind of below average Premier League striker. He got 8 assists last season, but from 3 expected assists. I don't know. So even the player he is now, the version of him that is as good as it gets, there are question marks. And that's without
Yeah,
coming to 33, 34, 35-year-old Fulkrug, where the contract becomes pretty heavy. And broadly, I like West Ham's business this summer. I like Kilman, though I think it was too expensive. I like Somerville. I think that was a good price. I think they've got Guido Rodriguez. They've bought a young winger out of Brazil. Like, this is all fine stuff. But given that they were linked to someone like Eli Wahi, and for a similar kind of price, it seems strange that they pulled the trigger on this one.
Yeah, I mean, this one I know, we were talking earlier in the pre-game before recording about if I had a job of just that I could say no 4 or 5 times a year in a football boardroom.
Yeah.
I think I would this is one I would have used that one of those, just saying, just don't. Like, the upside is so low, the downside risk is so high that, it's like, yeah, you could find better. I think you could definitely find better. And as I said, like, I can get clouded if I just watch him. I can be clouded by his movement and then his ball striking. I think he's really good. I think the way, if you want to look at what is the best case scenario for West Ham in this, is that I think he can play at a very high level, but as more of a creator than as a forward. Just playing, maybe someone that can find a runner. I think they signed Somerville, someone that can find, and then the Brazilian winger, I think Guilherme is his name.
Yeah. And of course Bowen as well, who's.
Yeah, I think he can definitely combine and find those runners. He can pick those out. I think that may be how they get the best value out of him. But as a number 9, I don't see this is going to be like a 4-year success story. Just not.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, yeah, I think that best case scenario, like, as I say, I'm quite bullish on West Ham this season, just because I think that though they finished 9th last year, I thought they're pretty bad. And I wouldn't be surprised if they play significantly better football this year while finishing lower, just because of how that went. But given that at the end of the season, it looked like, okay, Paquetá is going off to the gulag because, he's going to be following like Ted's betting newsletter. And that's a huge asset for them to lose. Like, oh my God, what is it going to look like for West Ham? Well, actually, now I look at it and I think, well, the Somerville price is really good, and I'm broadly okay with it. I just think that this one is, it's not, it's less the cost now than the, what is this going to stop them doing in 2 years' time, when once again they need a striker, as they seem to do perennially.
I mean, I mentioned like the other 2 strikers that they have are also very old. Like, you have to find, that itself should have, basically, I would have put a filter if I was signing a striker. If I was West Ham and I see Danny Ings and Mikel Antonio, it's kind of my 2 kind of main forwards in my roster right now. I would say, well, I'm not signing anybody under 28 or over 28. Just for saying, well, we need to get younger there, right?
Yeah.
I think, and it's okay. We can, and this is what one of the ways you minimize risk is you look at things about, like, there's this, what I think it's called the confusion matrix, appropriately. You want to avoid the false positive at any cost when you're doing this, which means that you're going to miss out on some good players. That means you'll have some false negatives that you kind of skew towards that side.
Yeah.
But your goal is, like, I don't want to make a bad signing, even if I miss out on a couple of good players, and that always happens. And I think that's the approach I would have taken to do this, just because of who I have, what the composition of my squad looks like right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, West Ham fans can obviously let us know what they think in the comments. I can see, I've already heard some of the Just So stories about it. Like, well, this has worked out for teams before, signing an old striker. It could work out for a year or 2, but we'll see. Maybe we'll come back to this in 2026 and do our victory lap.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that, again, it's always going to be interesting. Like, let's say he comes in this year, he has a great season, and they finish in, like, maybe Europa League spots. Let's just say. It's going to be an uphill battle, but let's say they finish in Europa League or Conference League, and they go, and the next season they go into the Conference League or the Europa League, and go to semifinals type of thing. okay, like someone might justify that saying, well, he gave us 2 good years, so that's a success. Like obviously, you know, so obviously we are all, this is all opinions based on what the information we have right now, but I
Hmm.
think, and what we have seen in the past with this type of signings, but there is always going to be an outlier case where it might work out. But I think that you can't plan based on outliers. Like, I think you have to be more firm. You have to have more certainty around those things.
Yeah, agreed. Should we move on to our last forward?
Yeah.
Uh, Another one which looks like it's fairly likely to happen. This is Samu Omorodion, who looks like he's going to be heading to Chelsea from Atletico Madrid for exactly the same price as Conor Gallagher is heading the other way, which is interesting. He's 20 years old. He was on loan at Alaves last season. He's not exactly like a big name, but I don't know. He had a pretty impressive campaign, I would say, wouldn't you? You're kind of our La Liga expert, Ravi, I think.
Yeah. Like I would say he's very. I remember like this. With Alaves is coming on, and it's like, whoa, who is this guy? But I never really kind of dug into him. But then I was doing some research on him, and he is, I think he's what, 19, 20 years old.
Yeah.
He's only had 2,000 minutes in top flight so far. But you watch him for 5 minutes, and I can understand why teams will be excited about him.
Hmm.
He's like 193, I think. He's 193 centimeters. So
Yeah,
that's
he's a
like
big
six
guy.
three, big guy. But he's pacey and strong player. Like if he's on the ball and he hits his stride, the only way you're stopping him is getting a red card or at least a yellow card. There is no way you're stopping him. That type of pace for that height. And I don't want to, like he's like, it's very exciting to watch. Like it's just like the potential looks enormous with a player like this, but he's like, I think there is a lot of growth he needs to have in terms of to round out his skills. He's very raw, I would say, at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like I think his, as strong as he is, I think his upper body can get stronger. Then I think you're looking at a body type maybe a lot like a Holland. Holland is 195. This
Hmm.
guy's 193. I think this, obviously, I think Holland is more well-rounded. I think obviously now, but even when he was at Dortmund, I think he was, I think he was, in terms of his technical skills, he was definitely much more advanced at this age
Okay.
than Omorodion.
Hmm.
But what I'm sure what scouts or what teams see is that, well, this guy can be that type of player or have that kind of impact if you can round out his skills. Like he needs to work on his shot. I think, as I said, I think his upper body needs some work because as big and tall as he is, I think he can still be kind of pushed off a bit easily if he's like in like I guess a Premier League defender that can. So there is still some growth that he need to have. His passing is limited. That's something that he needs to improve on. But like if I would say, like, if you get him into Premier League now, you put him on at 65th minute against tired defenses, and when
Mm.
the game opens up a little bit, he's going to be incredible. He's going to be fun to watch. But he's definitely had some development to have to maybe another season or 2 seasons to get to realize his full potential. But he's a very exciting prospect.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he had 10 goal involvements in about 2,000 minutes, and his
Yeah,
expected goals were actually better, suggested closer to 13. Which, like, for a mid-table side, like, is highly impressive stuff. And shot volume is nice, about three
yeah.
shots a
So
game.
yeah, so to that point, like you bring up a good point. You said like he had less goals than his XG is much higher because of the way he plays. He's always getting in these really good leverage situations with
Hmm.
maybe not many defenders around him. It's a transition moment where he's 1v1 with the keeper or just have to kind of push off a defender. But his shooting is not very good. Like he can improve on that. Like
Hmm.
his technique. And again, like he's 20 years old and he's only had like 2,000 minutes in top flight. If you try to watch his games before Alaves last season, you're watching where somebody's holding a camera on the sideline and recording. It's probably like
Sure.
third, fourth division level. So you see how his rise has been. So I think there is
Mm.
still a lot of. I think he's made rapid strides, but you need to fill up some of those foundational pieces for him to really be very effective forward in the Premier League. But
Mm.
in spots, like if you want to put him for 20 minutes, 15 minutes, like towards the end of the games, I think he will be a menace.
Yeah, I think he's got an interesting background because I know he was born in Melilla, so like that little Spanish outpost on the north
Yeah,
coast of Africa, and I think he's eligible for Spain or Nigeria as a national team. Like as you can tell from the name, he's got Nigerian heritage. But the passing, there's lots of stuff here that does interest me. Like I agree, very raw. Like you look at his numbers and you think over a dribble a game, that's interesting, and then you watch him and I think, oh, these dribbles are not happening. Like
yeah,
in the Premier League, like
yeah,
the touch is quite strong, I would say a lot of the time.
yeah,
But as you say, like he doesn't have a lot of reps yet, so
yeah.
he's certainly not somebody who's silky. And I think it's kind of funny. Ugh, given the way that Chelsea fans were with Nick Jackson last season, I do feel it, and the way they were with guys like Havertz and Timo Werner before that, I do feel a little bit concerned that if they're thinking this guy's going to come in, he's going to be a killer. I think no, he's going to require some patience.
Yeah, he's going to require a lot of patience. I think
Yeah,
Nicholas Jackson, again, another one coming from Villarreal,
yeah,
player. I thought, I don't know if you remember, he actually was going to sign with Bournemouth in the January window last year.
hmm
Um, he he took the flight to England, South Coast, and failed a medical. Got back to Villarreal. It was a pretty big disappointing for him. He did all this, how the players do like Instagram live and all that of him
yeah,
on the private plane going. And then he came back. But it took him a couple of weeks. But then he got back into the rhythm and scored a bunch of goals, and then got a bigger move to Chelsea. And I thought he did very well at Chelsea, knowing that Chelsea was in such a flux last year. My first reaction when I heard about this player being linked to Chelsea was, wait a second, they just got Nico Jackson. Where is this guy going to play? And I watched him, and I was like, okay, yeah, this is a little different. He's not going to be ready right now, and
yeah,
that to me worries a little bit with Chelsea. Is they're signing all these young players, and they don't seem to have the patience, and they're signing more young players in the next window, or like every window they're signing a lot of these potentials.
yeah,
I don't know if the idea is that if you're going to sign, if you can hit 1 out of 5, that would be a good success rate, or if they're doing that type of math. But it does seem like I don't know if that is the right place for him to grow, especially with the environment he's going to be in, unless he gets a loan into another club where he gets more time to play.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it feels like that's what. In the same week that he's joining, David Datro Fofana looks like he's off to Leicester on a loan.
Mhm.
And I mean, that's quite a good loan. That's a Premier League loan.
Yeah.
But after a year, 2 years of just sitting around doing nothing, that would concern me a little bit. The one thing that I'm quite interested in with him, the last thing I'll say about his kind of profile as a player, is that his pass accuracy is fairly low, but
Mhm.
Alaves were second bottom for pass accuracy
Yeah,
in Spain last season, so there might be some team effects there as well.
for
But
sure.
if you're rooting for chaos, then this Chelsea squad is going to give it to you. And I am always rooting for chaos when it comes to Chelsea. So I don't know. I'm very intrigued to see which of these players make reputations for themselves. But I think that even just leaving aside like how this is going to work as a football team, it worries me a little bit that there are all these young men essentially getting uprooted from the environments they grew up in. They go to West London, they're suddenly under huge pressure. They've got absolutely no consistency in the players around them, coaching, anything like that. I just don't know how you're meant to grow from a boy into a man in that kind of environment. I don't see how that could be good for you.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that's my concern. I think he has tremendous potential if you watch him, but he needs to be in the right place next couple of years to realize that. And I'm not sure, like, West London, Chelsea is the right place for that. I'm
Mm-hmm.
pretty sure. I hope that they have a plan for him, or where they're going to send him, or if he's going to stay at Chelsea, that he's going to get enough reps in maybe in the PL2 or a place like that.
Yeah, great. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our striker special. We will have another episode of the podcast coming out where we'll take a look at some other moves. Obviously Liverpool linked to a central midfielder, some interesting stuff going on. No doubt there'll probably be another installment of Striker Cast later on in the summer. There's another bunch of dominoes to fall. Thanks very much, Ravi. It was really good to see you again, and thank you to everybody for watching or listening. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, make sure you do. Make sure that you subscribe to us on your preferred podcast app. If you can leave us a 5-star review, that's really helpful as well. And make sure as well that you're reading the newsletter, because in my opinion, it is the best place this summer to get an intelligent roundup of the transfer news. And that's not me blowing my own horn, because I don't write any of it. So
yeah, thanks a lot, Patrick. And I think the Community Shield is this weekend, right? So we're getting on the game. Yeah. And so
it never ends.
It never ends. I think we also have plans to transition into a different type of podcast once this transfer season's over. We're going to look at how teams have done in the windows, and also how, and we'll talk about the games. And when the games start, it's all about the games, right? When they start playing, it's all great talking about moves now.
It's all about the stats, Ravi.
It's all about the stats.
It's all about the spreadsheets.
It's all about the spreadsheets. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye.